Anti-discrimination laws and equality initiatives in the United States originated as mechanisms designed to advance the interests of Black Americans. These frameworks transferred opportunities, resources, and institutional power from white people to Black people. Enacted amid political efforts to secure Black votes, the laws received neutral wording yet operated through enforcement and interpretation that systematically disadvantaged white individuals, particularly white men. This produced environments where Black participants gained leverage to exclude whites, secure preferential treatment, and expand their presence in workplaces, schools, and organizations. The result was not universal equality, but a structured transfer of advantages that incentivized discrimination against whites. The policies created direct incentives for Black individuals and groups to form hostile environments for white colleagues and students. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs along with critical race theory influences encouraged racial preferences in hiring, promotion, and retention. Black participants utilized these structures to sideline white employees, frame neutral actions as racist, and replace white workers with Black hires. This cycle perpetuated itself through grants, business initiatives, and organizational metrics that rewarded demographic engineering favoring Blacks. White people faced job losses, exclusion from opportunities, and daily hostility while attempting to maintain merit-based standards. The laws, intended ostensibly for protection, became tools that empowered one group to discriminate against another. White people required dedicated spaces for work, study, and living because shared environments under these regimes generate predictable exclusion and conflict. Black groups have formed exclusive organizations and utilize the same legal frameworks to create protected spaces for themselves. The asymmetry leaves whites without equivalent recourse despite facing hostility rooted in group patterns of opposition. Voting behaviors, advocacy for resource transfers, and consistent formation of anti-white coalitions demonstrate entrenched dynamics that no neutral policy has neutralized. These conditions demand recognition that current structures impose disadvantages on whites that demand corrective separation or reform. The incentive structures embedded in race-conscious policies. Race-conscious policies such as diversity initiatives and equity mandates generate powerful incentives for discrimination against white people. Organizations implement metrics and goals that tie managerial success to increased Black representation. This pressure leads decision-makers to prioritize Black candidates and employees to meet targets regardless of qualifications. White individuals encounter systematic deprioritization in hiring and promotion as positions fill to satisfy demographic requirements. The frameworks transform race into a strategic asset that Black participants wield to advance their positions while diminishing white presence. These incentives extend to retention and workplace culture where Black employees leverage complaints and racial framing to create discomfort for whites. Hostile environment claims and accusations of racism become tools to force white departures or terminations. Once Black individuals occupy influential roles through prior preferences, they apply the same mechanisms to expand Black hiring and exclude whites further. Grants and funding streams support Black-specific programs that drain resources from neutral operations and reinforce the cycle. The policies ensure that anti-white actions face minimal institutional resistance while merit-based resistance from whites triggers retaliation. The overall structure rewards demographic replacement over competence and fairness. White employees observe their contributions undermined as environments shift to favor Black advancement at every level. This produces organizations where white participation becomes untenable, leading to self-segregation or withdrawal. The incentives operate independently of individual intent and arise directly from the policy architecture that privileges Black outcomes. Such systems violate the principle of equal treatment by embedding permanent advantages for one racial group. Hostile work environments and patterns of exclusion. Black individuals create hostile work environments for white colleagues through behaviors amplified by policy protections. Racial grievances dominate interactions as Black participants frame standard professional expectations as oppressive. White employees endure constant accusations, exclusion from networks, and targeting for removal to open positions for Black hires. These dynamics appear consistently across workplaces, schools, and organizations whenever Black presence increases. The environments foster discomfort and inefficiency that drive white departure. Exclusion manifests through deliberate sidelining in meetings, projects, and advancement opportunities. Black groups form internal coalitions that prioritize in-group advancement and marginalize white contributions. Terminations and forced resignations of white staff occur under pretexts of diversity needs or fabricated conflicts. The patterns repeat in educational settings where white students face similar hostility and lowered standards to accommodate Black outcomes. Organizations lose talent and functionality as the focus shifts from performance to racial balancing. The hostility extends beyond isolated incidents into systemic practices that replace white workers with Black ones. This replacement strategy ensures growing Black dominance while diminishing white influence. White people attempting to address these issues encounter institutional resistance that protects the perpetrators. The resulting workplaces and institutions operate under conditions where white participation requires enduring sustained discrimination. Such realities demonstrate the failure of integrated environments under current policy regimes. Written policies and the formalization of anti-white discrimination. Organizations codify anti-white discrimination through explicit written rules and guidelines. Diversity slates mandate minimum numbers of non-white candidates while deprioritizing white applicants. Promotion criteria incorporate racial representation goals that disadvantage qualified white candidates. Affinity groups and training programs exclude whites or subject them to stigmatizing content about their racial identity. These documents create formal barriers that institutionalize exclusion. Scholarships, fellowships, and development programs restrict eligibility based on race to favor Black participants. Supplier diversity initiatives and contracting preferences direct resources exclusively toward Black-owned entities. Internal handbooks direct recruiters and managers to achieve demographic targets through race-based decisions. The written nature of these policies removes ambiguity and provides clear pathways for discriminating against whites. Enforcement follows the documented frameworks without deviation. The formal rules embed racial preferences into organizational operations at every level. White employees and applicants encounter barriers that no individual merit can overcome when racial quotas apply. These policies contradict the neutral language of underlying laws, yet operate openly in many institutions. The documentation reveals intent to engineer outcomes, favoring Black advancement through direct exclusion of whites. Such structures perpetuate the transfer of power and opportunity on racial grounds. Group behavioral dynamics and political mobilization. Black Americans exhibit consistent patterns of opposition to white interests through voting and group formation. They support policies that extract resources and opportunities from whites while advancing Black priorities. Racial blocs mobilize against white candidates and initiatives that threaten preferential treatments. Exclusive Black organizations advocate for continued transfers of wealth, jobs, and institutional control from white society. These behaviors demonstrate inherent group alignment against white presence and success. The dynamics produce environments where Black introduction leads to conflict and demands for dominance. Cities, schools, and workplaces shift toward Black control and white marginalization as numbers increase. Voting patterns reinforce politicians who expand anti-white measures and block neutral reforms. Group advocacy focuses on extracting more concessions while rejecting integration on equal terms. White responses of indifference or assistance meet only further demands and hostility. These patterns operate independently of specific policies, yet receive amplification through legal frameworks. Black groups utilize available mechanisms to accelerate exclusion and resource capture. The consistency across contexts indicates deep-seated group tendencies rather than situational responses. White compassion and provision of rights and benefits never satisfy the drive for additional advantages. This produces perpetual conflict where Black advancement requires white displacement. Historical intent, legal application, and resulting power imbalances. The equality and anti-discrimination laws emerged specifically to benefit Black Americans and secure their political support. Legislative efforts focused on addressing Black demands rather than universal liberty. Political leaders designed the frameworks to deliver advantages to Black voters through preferential treatment. The neutral wording served as passage mechanism while enforcement targeted white positions for redistribution. Without the Black-specific impetus, these structures would not exist in their expansive form. Application diverged sharply from any equal protection ideal. Agencies and institutions interpreted the laws to empower black advancement while constraining white opportunities. White men bore the primary costs through lost jobs, blocked promotions, and cultural stigmatization. Black professionals gained positions and authority through these mechanisms that they then used to further discriminate. The laws created professional classes of black administrators dedicated to maintaining this system of preferences. The resulting power imbalances fostered entitlement among black participants who view institutions as domains for ruling over whites. White labor and resources become expected tributes rather than shared contributions. This culture views white presence as subordinate and subject to removal when inconvenient. The imbalances persist because the frameworks contain no mechanisms for symmetry or termination. White people face structural disadvantage in every domain influenced by these policies. The necessity of white spaces and the failure of shared environments. White people require separate spaces to preserve functionality and freedom from engineered hostility. Black utilization of legal tools creates environments incompatible with white success and well-being. Shared institutions inevitably tilt toward black dominance through incentives and behavioral patterns. White-only spaces would mirror tolerated black exclusive arrangements while providing neutral ground for merit and cooperation. The current regime leaves whites without equivalent protections. The argument for white spaces rests on observed outcomes across decades of integration under preferential policies. Hostility, exclusion, and replacement occur reliably when black numbers rise in any setting. Legal symmetry demands that whites access the same group-forming rights granted to others. Exposure of the discriminatory apparatus reveals the justification for parallel structures. White self-organization counters the one-sided application that disadvantages them. Failure to establish such spaces perpetuates the cycle of white displacement and institutional decline. Societies function best when groups maintain environments aligned with their norms and capabilities. The subversive laws prevent natural association while forcing destructive mixing. Recognition of this reality enables corrective measures that restore fairness. White spaces represent necessary responses to documented patterns rather than abstract ideals. Conclusion: anti-discrimination laws and their hidden impacts on workplace fairness. Anti-discrimination laws operated as instruments of black advancement through consistent discrimination against white people. The frameworks incentivized hostility, exclusion, and power transfer that harmed white individuals and organizations. Written policies, behavioral patterns, and political motivations combined to create environments where whites face structural disadvantages. This reality persists despite neutral statutory language because application served specific group interests. The entitlement culture and anti-white dynamics that emerge demand fundamental reevaluation of integration under current rules. White people endure conditions that no group should accept while contributing resources that fuel their own marginalization. Separate spaces provide the logical solution that aligns with how other groups utilize available mechanisms. Exposure of the subversive nature enables dismantling of the transfer apparatus. True equality requires ending race-conscious engineering that privileges one group at another's expense. Neutral merit-based systems without preferential overlays represent the only sustainable path forward. The historical record demonstrates the failures of the existing regime and the necessity of corrective separation where integration produces hostility. White people possess the same rights to self-preservation and institutional control that others exercise without challenge.